Greetings, Starfighters. Welcome to Mad Science Films. I'm Jimmy P, filmmaker and sexual astronaut. First up, guys, please check out our fourth feature film for free on YouTube. Just search for Little Monster or click on the link in the show notes below. This episode is a very special episode, and I'm joined by a very special guest, a filmmaker at the cutting edge of web series and using existing platforms to his own benefit, Mr. Mark Garvey. So, guys, pack your miniature submarine because this episode is going to be a deep dive into making films for an online audience. So, Mark, thanks for joining us again. So, my own exposure to your work actually came about last year during lockdown, binging a whole bunch of weird kind of stuff on YouTube, and up popped Union Jack, the web series. Now, I was absolutely touched that anybody outside of the hardest of hardcore Marvel fans had even heard of the character Union Jack, let alone love the character enough to make a web series. So I absolutely just had to binge watch the whole damn thing. I think it took me a couple of days, to be fair, because there were in total about 10 episodes in altogether.
10 episodes, half an hour each, so a total of about 5 hours.
So what was the appeal of doing a Union Jack TV series, a web series for you?
The appeal was just to play in that Marvel arena, really. I'd always loved Marvel, not DC. I love comic books and superheroes since I came out of the womb, but Marvel was really my go-to company. And, you know, all my life reading the comics, playing the toys, dressing up, you name it. Always fantasized about being involved in some way, doing something, and being a very low-key, low-budget indie filmmaker. Obviously, it's implausible to do anything on even the smallest scale of the current Marvel Cinematic Universe. But we tried to find a way where we could work in that world, in that existing universe, but do so in a achievable way without dragons and cosmic battles and God knows what else, and just have sort of normal everyday people doing silly British things, but on the stage of vampires and secret agents and terrorist attacks and those kind of things. So it was a weird sort of amalgamation of the boring, the mundane, the everyday, the trivial, the absurd, with the big high concept, blockbustery kind of stuff. But doing so on a fiver instead of the billions that they have at their fingertips.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely loved that kind of smash of the mundane against the supernatural, the superhero or whatever, and it definitely had that very British flavour, which Marvel hasn't got around to doing yet. So absolutely great to kind of be able to see that. I'm hoping, obviously, they've got 3-4 TV series out already, more coming. Whether we start getting more traditional kind of like Marvel sitcoms and other formats, other genres and stuff like that going forward. It's an exciting time to be like a comic book fan. If you told me in the 80s and 90s whether there'd be decent Marvel adaptations, I would not have believed you. I'd been burnt too many times in the past. Coming up then with Twas the Devil. Again, that was just another discovery. The YouTube algorithms just kind of threw it up onto my suggestions. Love the absolute concept of it, this choose your own adventure, fighting fantasy kind of modular storytelling thing. Dove into it, and then clicking through to the channel, found it was you guys again. So it was a real pleasant surprise to kind of go, oh, okay, the guys who did this also did this, and it made me very excited and want to speak to you because I absolutely love the concept of doing a choose your own adventure storytelling thing using something like YouTube. So Mark, which one really kind of came first with Twas the Devil? Was it the content, the narrative, the story idea, or was it the form, the idea of doing this branching story?
So it wasn't originally going to be interactive. In the first instance, the idea formed, and it was going to be a road movie set historically with the use of language and costume and mise-en-scène and all of that stuff. And it was going to be a journey where somebody is trying to get from A to B and has all these various obstacles and characters along the road. But it did feel a little straightforward or a little easy, or perhaps repeating ourselves. We've done a road movie in the past. And so that's when the idea came to make it interactive. And we'd seen, there'd been a couple of interactive things in the last few years that had worked very well. And Twas the Devil was essentially about the witch hunts and, you know, taking responsibility for your actions and the consequences of your actions. So thematically, the film lends itself to ideas of choice. And so using that theme in the actual storytelling, in the narrative, made a lot of sense. None of us have ever done anything remotely like this before, so it was a real steep learning curve, and we did have to watch a ton of stuff to get ideas and inspiration. But yeah, for us it was probably too much a case of repeating ourselves if we were just going to make a straight 85-minute, you know, indie whatever down the woods, because we've done that a number of times. So we really wanted to do something that really pushed ourselves and, you know, exploring new ground and not repeating ourselves and, you know, taking a bit of a risk and doing something a little bit different, and, you know, capitalising on an emerging kind of format where there are no pre-existing rules or conventions. So we're not breaking these rules, we're kind of making them up because there's no pattern or procedure to follow, really. So yeah, it was good fun. It was mind-bending and confusing and challenging, and you know, involved all manner of sort of going a certain way down a particular route or down a certain path, and then realising this isn't going to work, or no, what have we done? And then having to go back and rethink and problem solve, which is all part of any creative process, but it was even more challenging on this one because we didn't have many examples to follow. We didn't have a guidebook. It's not like you can go on Amazon and buy how to make an interactive whatever. There's no sort of pioneers or gurus out there that have done this and are sharing their experience with other people, as is the case with just about every other format you can imagine.
I mean, as a kid growing up, you know, again, I had the Fighting Fantasy books. I don't know if you know, you had those too, you know, the Pete Jackson, Steve Livingston, all those kind of books. And I love the fact that we're now at a point with technology that it makes it easy that we can, well, easy, it makes it easier or possible at all to, you know, tell these stories, you know, via a filmic medium. We were talking earlier, you know, like Netflix obviously have got in on the action recently with Bandersnatch and the Bear Grylls shows. What I love in particular that you've done is you've taken the existing platform of YouTube, and the end screen, which all YouTubers kind of use, you know, gives you two options or whatever. And you've kind of hacked that system and you've turned it so that, you know, those pre-existing formats are the guide that you have. You know, that's your turn to page, you know, 47, and this is your turn to page 317. And I love just some of the little linking segments that you did where the character is looking directly at the viewer when you're asking the viewer to make a decision, you know, like, you know, stay on the path, stray from the path. And to me, that absolutely blew my mind when I first kind of saw that and was first given that decision. I was like, oh, wow. That is amazing. And as an indie filmmaker myself, I just love the fact that, yeah, you kind of hacked this system.
Yeah, so the end screens aren't a perfect science. You know, the technology isn't quite ideal. So when we shot, we actually had Simon, the actor, stand dead still and stare directly into the lens for an entire minute. However, YouTube limits that to 20 seconds until it makes a decision if you don't make a decision. So poor Simon had to stand staring into the lens for much longer than you actually get to see. And annoyingly, often he would turn and look, and after 30 or 40 seconds, much more strangeness took place. So you see a bit of it in the version on YouTube. However, there's much more where all kinds of mad stuff happened. So there's one in particular where a fly was just crawling all over his face. There's one where he's slapping himself, not because of a fly, because out of anger and whatever. And so annoyingly, the technology isn't perfect. And another problem that we faced with that is several people didn't have access to the end screen. So it's kind of dependent on your browser or the version of the YouTube app that you have. So some people were actually contacting me and going, "Oh, Mark, I really like your new film. Why is it only 7 minutes long though? Why does it end with Simon just looking into the lens?" And they didn't realise. So if the options don't appear, you can't click. So it just finishes with the guy staring into the lens. So, and someone who was actually in the film was like, she contacted me and said, "What? Where am I, Mark? I don't understand." And so yeah, it doesn't appear universally, annoyingly, and that's why there's a little disclaimer at the beginning giving some explanation. I guess that's one of the dangers if you're doing something a bit weird and a bit new and a bit experimental is you kind of got to make do with what's available to you. You know, the technology isn't sort of accessible and at our fingertips in the ideal way that we would like it to be. So, but yeah, it did feel a bit like we were hacking YouTube and using and abusing their existing features for our own benefit.
I mean, I love what you were saying earlier about, you know, challenging yourself. I mean, most people would kind of say, a road movie, period piece, black and white, old English language. That might have been enough of a challenge, but no, you had to go one further with a choose your own adventure style narrative. Brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, with each project that we do, we always try and do something different and up the stakes or the risk. And we've actually done a project since "'Twas the Devil," which is even more bizarre and weird in its own way. So yeah, I don't like artists that repeat themselves, you know, or just make the same album or whatever time and time again. I like those, you know, creatives that take you by surprise, you know. A guitar band that drops an album that's electronic music. What the hell? You know, you don't see it coming, but you know, they retain their voice or their signature, but they do something completely different and unpredictable. And I think you know, if you want to make art and you want to tell stories, there's little point in repeating the same story time and time again. Try different stories, and some might work, some might not. But I think it's important to do something different and mix it up and not repeat oneself. Vary things up and take chances and risks and enjoy that process. And you know, God knows what the next project will be, but I imagine it won't be a simple, straightforward rom-com or whatever. It will be something that's different and weird.
Nice. So I'm guessing in the pre-production stage there wasn't a script, at least in terms of the traditional sense. You know, how do you go about pre-production on a process like that with a script which has I don't know how many different potential nodes, modules, whatever you want to call them?
That was really challenging because usually you have a document, you know, scene 1, scene 2, whatever, and it just goes through in a linear fashion. But with this, it just couldn't work like that, and it was necessary to create a method which we could use as guidance. But it was an incredibly complex process, and initially scenes were sort of on individual bits of paper and then scattered around, and you know, my studio became plastered in stuff, the floor was covered in stuff, and it was a constant sort of move this here, change this here. It was a very messy, complex process. And another thing that we encountered was we didn't necessarily have the existing sort of language that you have. You talk about a scene or you talk about a take or whatever, but in this, we were coming up with branches, nodes, clusters, paths. You know, we had to sort of devise terminology to talk about the project and understand what everybody meant. Script readings were very, very difficult because the script itself was huge. You know, a big old whopper of a telephone book, because there was every version of every scene was there. But you know, we would read the first one, and then somebody would make a choice and say, right, I'm going to do this, and it would say, if you do this, go to page 11. And so we all had to turn to page 11 and then read a scene, and then he made this choice, right, go to page 36. And so it was very akin to those traditional 80s choose your own adventure books, where a lot of page turning. For some reason as well, the script reading we did in costume.
What kind of size are we talking? Like, you know, how many pages are we talking in terms of length compared to a traditional, you know, they say a page a minute, don't they? So, you know, if it's a traditional feature, say 8 minutes, that's 85 pages. What was the final damage on 'Twas the Devil?
I think the script was about 280 pages. But it's hard to calculate because some of the scenes were copied and pasted exactly, but a few bits were changed. But it was necessary to have the alternative version in the script. So if somebody chose that one, or when we were filming that one, we had that different version. So it's very hard to calculate how long the overall project is, because there's duplications of scenes with variations within. So do you count the whole thing as you know, twice, or do you just count the bits that are different? And there's takes where you know, there's sort of like intermission shots, traveling shots, montage shots, where we've used different takes depending on which sequence you encounter. So it's really quite difficult, I'd probably say impossible, to actually figure out how long the overall piece is. However, there is actually a linear version currently in progress. So I'm doing a cut that will be a more conventional, straightforward beginning, middle, and end journey with no interaction. It will be a linear cut, as requested by various people, many of whom had trouble accessing it, or couldn't download the YouTube app or whatever. So yeah, and it's really interesting going back to a project that's been complete for some time now, and coming to a project later with fresh eyes and a ton of footage, and sort of reinterpreting that and trying to figure out, hold on, if he gives the coin early on, but then how does it make sense later on when he's got the coin and gives that to someone else? So it's a real, the narrative is this huge bowl of spaghetti where, you pull one thing and, it all comes undone over here.
You're not tempted to do the 80s movie Clue, where they had like the different endings, and then it was Professor Plumb.
Yeah. I don't think I can handle that. But, somebody said, so the linear version will be the definitive version. And I thought, no, the original as intended interactive version is the definitive version, if such a thing exists. This is just an alternative version. And even though it's more conventional in that it has a beginning, middle, and an end, and it follows a linear path, it would still be weird because, of course, it's using the existing strange aesthetics and sounds and performances, and so even though it's by the book and following the rules, it will still be bonkers and out there and very alternative and unusual. So I'm happy with that.